Regardless of your views on the death penalty, it is indisputable that many people find the thought of a criminal's last moments of life morbidly fascinating, from what his last meal was to how he spent his final hours. But the subject of someone's last words seems to fascinate us most of all. Many criminals will express sorrow and regret, or just defiance, but every so often words are spoken that chill onlookers for years to come. Here is my choice for 5 creepy last words from death row. Number 5. Gary Gilmore. Gary Mark Gilmore began his career of crime at an early age. As a teenager, he was constantly in trouble with the law for stealing cars. However, he graduated to violent robbery in 1962 and was given a 15-year jail term for armed robbery and assault. He was conditionally paroled in April 1976 and went to live with a cousin in Utah, but just 3 months later his life took a fatal turn. On the night of July 19, 1976, Gilmore became a murderer. Entering an empty gas station, he pulled out a gun and pointed it at the employee, Max Jensen. He instructed Mr. Jensen to empty his pockets, which he did, and then to enter the bathroom and lay down on the floor. Max Jensen did not resist Gilmore's demands, however there would be no mercy for him that night. Gilmore pointed the gun at Jensen's head and said, "This one's for me," then pulled the trigger. He then shot Jensen again, saying, "This is for Nicole," Nicole being his girlfriend at the time. The next night, Gilmore continued his bloodletting and murdered a motel employee named Ben Bushnell. In a similar fashion to the previous night's killing, he first robbed the victim before forcing him to lay down on the floor and finally shooting him in the head. A few days later, the cousin Gilmore had been staying with turned him into the police. After initially denying the charges, he soon confessed. Upon conviction, he was sentenced to death and had the choice of being killed either by hanging or by firing squad. He chose firing squad, believing it to be the most assured way of receiving a quick death. What makes this strange is that most people would try to fight a death sentence, or at least delay it as much as possible, but not Gilmore. He waived all rights to appeal, and seemed eager to be put to death as quickly as possible. On the morning of January 17, 1977, the 5-man volunteer firing squad assumed their positions behind small square holes in a wall, aiming their weapons at Gilmore, who was restrained in a chair on the other side of the wall. The restraints were tight, as the slightest movement could cause the men shooting to miss. A hood was placed over his head. Then Gilmore uttered his infamous last words, "Let's do it." These last words seemed to encapsulate his desire to receive his punishment as quickly as possible. He almost seemed to relish the idea of being executed. And what makes this tale even creepier is that it has been confirmed that these last words inspired Nike's famous advertising slogan, "Just do it." Dan Wyden, the advertising executive who came up with the slogan, admits that Gilmore's last words were his inspiration for the slogan. Number 4. Eileen Wuornos. Eileen's childhood was one of sexual abuse and neglect. Her father was a convicted child molester who hung himself in prison, and she was raped and made pregnant at the young age of 14 by her grandfather's friend. This tragic start to life no doubt set her on a dark path. As a young woman, she was frequently in trouble with the law, and was convicted multiple times through her early life. It was while working as a prostitute that she got her taste for murder. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a convicted rapist whom she claimed to have killed in self-defense as he attempted to rape her. His body was found riddled with bullet holes in a nearby wooded area, and she was later on linked to 6 other murders, all of whom were killed by gunshot wounds. After the murders were made public, she was labelled by the media as America's first female serial killer. At first, her defense was that the men had attempted to rape her and that she was merely acting in self-defense. However, she later withdrew this defense and admitted that her sole reason for killing the men was to rob them and leave no witnesses alive. The story takes another twist, however, as whilst being interviewed by filmmaker Nick Broomfield, there was a period when she thought that the cameras were switched off, and during this time she confessed to Broomfield that the murders were in fact in self-defense, but that she had changed her statement as she just wanted to die and could not stand being on death row any longer. She was executed by lethal injection on the morning of October 9th, 2002. Her last words were chilling and somewhat bizarre. She is recorded as saying, "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, big mothership and all. I'll be back, I'll be back." Number 3. Peter Kürten. Known as both the Vampire of Dusseldorf and the Dusseldorf Monster, Peter Kürten was a German serial killer who terrorized the city of Dusseldorf between February and November 1929. He was born the son of a violent alcoholic, and like many killers, got into petty crime at a young age. He also displayed a sick and cruel side early on in his life, often torturing and killing animals. However, it was not long before he progressed from animals to people. His first recorded victim was a 9-year-old girl whom he raped and strangled during a house robbery. He went on to murder at least 9 more people, often raping his victims first. The authorities finally caught up with Curtin after a young girl he had raped led police to his house. During questioning, it was discovered that he drank the blood of at least one of his victims, earning him his grisly nickname. He soon confessed to 9 murders and 7 attempted murders, stating that his main motive was one of sexual pleasure. He found the sight of blood arousing, and his last words were fitting for such a twisted and sick individual. Before having his head cut off by guillotine, he uttered the words, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." Bizarrely, after execution, his head was mummified, and it's still on display to this day at the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Wisconsin. Number 2. Christina Marie Riggs. On May 2, 2000, Christina Marie Riggs was executed by lethal injection for the unimaginable crime of killing her own 2 children. On November 4, 1997, she poisoned her 5-year-old son in his sleep. However, she gave him too small a dose of the poison, which left him in great pain but still alive. After realizing that the poison was ineffective, she then smothered her son and his 2-year-old sister with a pillow. She then tried to kill herself with a mixture of pills and poison. Her attempt at suicide also failed, and she was soon arrested and charged with the murder of her son and daughter. She pleaded insanity, believing that the murder was an act of love, but she was convicted nonetheless. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection, and while strapped to the chair, she uttered her infamous last words. "There is no way, no words can express how sorry I am for taking the lives of my babies. Now I can be with my babies, as I always intended. I love you, my babies." In a final twist to the sad tale, she was injected with the very same potassium chloride poison that she had initially tried to poison her own children with. Number 1. Lavinia Fisher. The legend of Lavinia Fisher reads like something more out of Hollywood than reality, but as her killing spree took place nearly 200 years ago, it is difficult to separate fact from fiction. According to many sources, Lavinia and her husband operated a hotel called the 6 Mile Wayfarer House in Charleston, South Carolina. During this time, it was noticed that a large number of men in the Charleston area began to go missing, and that they had last been seen at Lavinia's hotel. Lavinia was well known as being a beautiful and charming woman, and these abilities certainly helped business at her hotel. Along with her husband, she would entice men who were travelling through Charleston to spend the night at the hotel. Once they were inside, she would offer them tea laced with a herb, which acted as a powerful sedative. This poisoned beverage would put the man to sleep for several hours, and once he had taken the tea, she would allocate him a special room. Bizarrely, this room contained a trapped bed. Once the man was asleep, the floorboards beneath the bed would open up and the man would be dropped down into the hotel basement, where he would be quickly finished off by Lavinia's husband, and his corpse would be robbed of any valuables. The pair's murderous ways came to an end the night a traveller named John Peoples came to stay at the hotel. Lavinia used her usual routine on him and offered him the drugged tea. However, John Peoples hated tea, but not wanting to appear rude, he accepted the cup, discreetly pouring away the tea when Lavinia was not looking. Lavinia showed John to the trapped room and left, waiting for him to fall asleep, but something about the way the pair was acting made Mr. Peoples suspicious, and he suspected that they might be trying to rob him. He made the fortunate decision to sleep in the chair near the door that night, fearing an intruder to his room, and was awoken by the loud noise of the trapped bed springing into action. He quickly fled the hotel and rode into town, where he alerted authorities. The murderous couple were arrested, and the remains of over 100 men were discovered in their basement. They were both given the death penalty. However, Lavinia hoped to escape execution, as at that time it was unlawful in South Carolina to hang a married woman. The judge got around this clause by hanging her husband first, thus making Lavinia a widow, and therefore eligible for execution. Lavinia wore her wedding dress to the gallows, hoping to charm one of the onlookers into taking pity on her and marrying her, thus saving her from the hangman's noose. But when this plan failed, her charm gave way to rage and vitriol. Before the executioners could finish tightening the noose around her neck, Lavinia yelled her famous and chilling last words to the crowd. If you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me. I'll carry it." She then jumped from the scaffold, hanging herself before the executioner could release the trapdoor. Witnesses to the execution said that the expression on her lifeless face was fixed in a wicked and defiant sneer. So that's my choice. Let me know what you think in the comments below and who I missed. So thanks for watching, I do appreciate it, and I hope to see you again soon.